conscious but paralyzed in some way.
Oh,
so they were kind of like
that's the worst.
Completely controlled. And so they were taken aboard the ship and then were subjected to these examinations, they called it. And there was kind of very hazy, and they sort of didn't offer a whole lot of in-depth explanation of what happened. And I guess we'll kind of find out later why, possibly. I say that with a smile on my face. But so they go through this like these sort of, you know, medical examinations, we'll say, and then they're released. So they obviously didn't go into a whole lot of detail, but one thing on the ship, Hickson claimed that he was examined by what looked like a large football-shaped, again, mechanical eye that was about 6 to 8 inches in diameter, and it seemed to be scanning his entire body. So that's kind of how it started. And the younger guy apparently was mostly unconscious during this part, and what he remembers, he only kind of remembers after a hypnotic session where he sort of pieced together a few bits and pieces. So the two guys, they say they were released from the craft not real long, like 15, 20 minutes after they kind of estimated. And they said the creatures levitated them, and Hickson distinctly remembers his feet dragging along the ground back to the original positions where they were taken from the riverbank. Man, that reminds me of my experiences in that house where I was kind of dragging along the ground. I couldn't reach the floor. Anyway, tangent.
Yeah, you say attachment, I say abduction, but go on.
Yeah, sure. I'll buy that.
That's creepy.
So these two guys, they come to on the riverbank, and they go sit in their car for like 45 minutes, and they're just in shock. They're terrified. They don't know what to do. So what they first end up doing is, when they kind of get their wits about them again, is they head straight to the Keesler Air Force Base, which I guess was kind of nearby. I didn't look it up. I assume it's nearby. But they go to the Air Force officials, and the Air Force officials immediately dismiss them, tell them, go talk to the police. We don't care. So that's what they do. They go straight to the police. And the police were even less interested in what they were talking about. Super incredulous with their whole story. They could not. They're like, what do you boys been drinking out there tonight? This was like back in the 70s too, where everyone kind of assumes, not assumes, but like they ask if you're drinking of a lot of these like, abductees and stories. Like, has anyone ever hallucinated while they drank?
Not one.
It's such a stupid
No, exactly.
Yeah.
It's
like,
just
doesn't
the
make you
dumbest
hallucinate.
thing.
Yeah, that's never happened. I mean, maybe if I do psychedelics, but I'm never like drunk and be like, I saw an alien last night. Like, what?
Yeah.
Or high, either one. You don't really hallucinate. No, that's ridiculous. That's also peak time where people were like, if you saw a UFO, you were really made fun of. Especially, it's been loosened over the years, but that was like the beginning of like, you don't bring that shit up. Imagine that experience and it really happening and trying to get people to believe you, and no one did. That's like a nightmare in itself.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that they were saying, like, these two kind of super normal, just American Joes, why would they put themselves through this amount of ridicule just to tell a story and hopefully get famous? Like, it doesn't make sense why anyone would do that. But anyway, so the police did not believe them at all. They thought they were bullshitting, and they thought like, oh, okay. So their plan was, they hatched together this plan in the sheriff's department, where they'd sit him in this interrogation room, and they set up in the interrogation room these voice-activated voice recorders. And so they leave the room, and the two fellas are sitting in there. And what they thought they would get, obviously, is these two guys going, just trying to like get their story straight. Like, okay, what are you going to say next? Oh, what are you going to say next? And it was going to be, okay, we got you, boys. Sorry, get the fuck out of here. But instead, what actually happens is it kind of enforces their story, because they're still so freaked out. And I have a bit of a transcript here. I was going to play the audio, but it sounds like it was recorded through a potato, so you can't really hear too much. But
the police were probably drinking.
Yeah. So I'll read a few bit different pieces of this transcript. Okay, so some of the transcript is like really weird, because they're chatting to each other about what they just experienced. Like, you think if these two guys were bullshitting and they were sitting alone in the room where they thought, no one was listening to them, obviously they'd be like, they bought it kind of thing, or, I don't think this is going well, or whatever,
Yeah.
But these guys were, like, freaked out. So this is kind of a few bits and pieces of what they were saying. So Calvin says, the younger guy to the older guy, Charles, he says, I can't sleep yet. I'm just damn near crazy. Charles says, well, Calvin, when they brought you out, they brought me out to that thing. My arms. I remember they just froze up and I couldn't move, just like I stepped on that damn rattlesnake. They didn't do me that way. So Calvin says, I passed out. I never passed out my whole life. Charles says, I've never seen nothing like it before in my life. You can't make people believe. Calvin, I don't want to keep sitting here. I want to see a doctor. Charles, they better wake up and start believing. They better start believing. Calvin, you see how that damn door just came right up like that? I don't know how it opened, son. I don't know. It just laid up. And just like that, those sons of bitches, they just came out. I was paralyzed right then. I couldn't move. And so it goes on, like there's a whole section, and they talk about like being super scared where they don't want to, maybe they should stop talking to the police just in case these things come back. Like, this is not the banter between two people who are making up a story. These guys are freaked. And sort of the end line, Charles says, Jesus Christ, God have mercy. I thought I've been through enough hell on this earth, but now I have to go through something like this. But they could have, I guess they could have harmed us, son. They had us. They could have done anything to us, but they didn't hurt me. So this was kind of a thing that sort of came up. These two guys after this, no matter how freaked out they were, years later, and they stuck to the story for years until the head guy, the older guy, died. They said the same story over and over again. They never wavered. It was always that this happened for sure. So I think it was in 2018 where Parker, the younger guy who was still alive at the time, I think he's still alive now, maybe. He was given this recording of their encounter in the police station when they didn't think they were being recorded, and he was given it to him by an unnamed member of the Pascagoula Police Department, who said he was on duty that night and claimed to have fielded roughly 50 phone calls that night from people claiming to have seen something unusual in the sky that very night. Which was super interesting, right?
So that verifies that at least something happened.
Yeah. And so even the police, after they listened to this is one of the guys who was there that night, Captain Glenn Ryder of the Sheriff's Department. He says, I put them in a room with a voice-activated recorder, and that convinced me. When that boy was talking about them coming back to get us, you had an 18-year-old boy that had never seen anything. He was genuinely scared. He was telling Charlie, don't talk to the deputies, they'll come back and get us. They didn't make it up, I can guarantee it. That was what one of the police officers there that night explained. So Parker actually began to express in following interviews throughout the years that he actually had further encounters with these things.
So really? Okay.
Afterwards.
Yeah,
very
so
common.
Actually,
very
both
common.
men claimed later on in further interviews that these things kept coming back to them and taking them up in these encounters. But they both were of the mind at this point that it was a positive thing, and they kind of almost looked forward to it every time, which is I don't know, that it keeps coming back to that whole like mind manipulation thing. It's like, you guys want to be cattle. This is fine. We're having a good time.
Well, that reminds me of the Finnish town. At first, it was fearful. They were afraid. Why are these things coming to all these people in town? And then they looked at it like they were giving them hope, like they were somehow helping them. So it's weird. It is weird.
Yeah. And the last thing is, Parker claimed years later that his memories of the original incident in 1973 sort of began to return, especially after his hypnotic regression that he went through. And he recalled some interesting details that included a woman on board, a female, who on board the craft that subjected him to some variety of sexual examination while he was there. And so that's what I kind of believe that, they kind of kept that bit to themselves for a little bit, But, the more he started talking about it, the more it sort of came out. He was more brave about talking about it. But again, it's that interesting point about sexuality, reproduction,
right?
That these beings seemed really interested in. And I was thinking, like, is it that they're interested in reproduction and cloning and genetics and all that sort of stuff? Or is it just that they, I don't know, give you a reach around just so you won't talk about it afterwards? I don't know what the deal is there, but
I don't think forced sex is not going to get people to. I mean, they're still going to talk about it. I mean, like the guy's paralyzed, and some like hot Nordic chick comes down and is like, "Hey, I just want to play with you." I mean, come on, he's like going to talk about it.
Sure,
right? Yeah. I'd have zero problem bringing up that story. That'd be
Josh,
first.
You are on fire tonight.
Yeah, I am. I've had a little too much of this wine. I can feel it. I can feel it tomorrow. I'm going to be like a little grumpy. It's going to be all right, though. It's worth it.
Worth it. Totally worth it.
So I just think that all these stories, the similarities are, one, they keep revisiting the same area. The stories are kind of similar. Even if you go back to 1639, I don't think anybody in the 1960s and 1970s were reading 1639 Puritan Journal, meaning the same exact story kind of keeps happening, right? So they see a weird light, they see a craft, and then suddenly they have loss of time, and then they return back to where they were, and then something happened, but sometimes they don't know what it is. Sometimes they remember. I just think it's an interesting thing, and then they keep returning, and what do they want? I just think it's so interesting. And that people are okay with it after a certain amount of time. It's almost like, what's that called in psychology when you have a torturer and you start to have sympathy for the person who tortures you?
Oh, something syndrome.
It's the
Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah. It's kind of like that. Like, it's okay. I want you to come take me and probe me and stuff. And I really want to see my Nordic girlfriend. You know what I mean? Everything's fine. Everything's good.
Right. Yeah, it's manipulation, man.
Oh, stop it. Stop it. Just like we sometimes pluck animals out of the forest and give them a little shot to make them feel a little better, and we examine them. Doesn't mean we're evil. They're probably doing the same thing to us. I'm just kidding. I'm just going to be on their side in case they take over. Whose side are you on, man? Pick a side.
I, for one, welcome you alien overlords. Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't share the same view. I'm going to fight it till the end. Matt and I will be the negative ones. We're gonna be the first ones to die.
Yep.
All right, so that's all we have for tonight. Make sure if you had a story, we'd love to hear it. So hit us up on Cosmic Cantina on our Facebook or thecosmiccantina.com. We'd love to hear your stories if you have some. Instagram. We're here for you. But I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and be safe out there.
Goodbye.